Victor Bennett had always prided himself on being the pillar of his family. He was the dependable one, the one everyone turned to when things went wrong. As a successful lawyer, he had always had the means to ensure that his family never had to worry about anything. He had paid for his children's education, bought them their first cars, and ensured they had everything they needed. His wife, Caroline, had supported him through it all, taking care of their home and children while Victor worked long hours. Victor had always been the protector, the one who solved problems, the one who made everything better. But somewhere along the way, he began to feel overwhelmed. His children, now in their late 20s, had become accustomed to relying on him for everything. They had never truly learned how to stand on their own, and he had never stopped giving, never stopped offering his help. Jack, his eldest son, was 28 and full of ambition, but he lacked follow-through. He had dropped out of college years ago to pursue various business ventures, none of which ever seemed to work out. Victor had supported Jack through all of his failures, providing him with money whenever he asked. Jack had promised him that each new venture would be the one that made it, the one that would set him on the path to success. But each time, the plan failed, and Jack would call Victor for more help. His daughter, Lily, was 25 and had just finished her degree in marketing. She had been working in a small firm, but the job wasn't steady, and she often found herself needing assistance from her father to cover rent or bills. Though Lily had the qualifications and skills, she lacked confidence, and Victor had stepped in to help her every time she faltered. The more Victor gave, the more they took. It wasn't out of malice he knew his children loved him, but it was as if they had come to expect him to fix everything. The burden of this constant support had started to weigh heavily on him. The requests for money, the need for advice, the phone calls in the middle of the night asking for help, it had become exhausting. That night, after yet another call from Jack asking for money to cover rent because of yet another business failure, Victor found himself sitting alone in his study, his hands trembling slightly as he stared at the stacks of papers on his desk. His office was pristine, a reflection of the life he had built. But today it felt suffocating. He had been running on fumes for years. He had given everything he had, his time, his money, his energy, and yet it never seemed to be enough. The truth was, he had neglected himself in the process. He had put his children's needs before his own, but in doing so, he had lost sight of who he was outside of his role as a father. He had spent so many years as the one who provided, the one who solved problems, that he couldn't remember the last time he had done something purely for himself. Victor glanced at the clock. It was late, but he couldn't sleep. He stood up from his desk, pacing around the room as the weight of the situation pressed on his chest. He had always been there for them, always the one to catch them when they fell, to pick up the pieces of their broken dreams. But now, after so many years, he was beginning to see the truth. His children had never truly learned to take responsibility for their lives. They had always relied on him, and he had allowed it. The realization hit him like a tidal wave. By constantly rescuing them, he had kept them from learning how to stand on their own 2 feet. They were adults now. They needed to face their own challenges, handle their own responsibilities, and deal with the consequences of their actions. He had done everything he could, and it was time for them to take ownership of their lives. Victor knew it wouldn't be easy. His children wouldn't understand, not at first. They would be angry, hurt, and maybe even resentful. But deep down, he knew that this was the right thing to do. It was time to stop being their crutch, to stop fixing everything for them. He had to let them go, and in doing so, he had to let go of the idea that his role as a father meant always providing for them. The decision felt both terrifying and liberating. It was the hardest thing he had ever done, but it was necessary. As a father, his job wasn't to constantly bail them out. His job was to teach them how to stand on their own, how to face the challenges life would throw at them, and he couldn't do that if he kept enabling them. Victor sat down at his desk and pulled out his phone. He hesitated, his finger hovering over the screen as he thought about what to say. He had always been there to fix things, to make everything better. But this time, there would be no fix. He typed out the message, feeling his heart race as he did. I can't keep doing this anymore, Jack. I've done everything I can. You're an adult now, and you need to figure things out for yourself. He stared at the message for a moment, his heart pounding in his chest. This wasn't going to be easy. But it was time. He pressed send and waited. A minute passed, then another. There was no reply. Victor set the phone down, his thoughts swirling. What would Jack say? What would Lily say when she found out? Would they hate him for this? Would they ever forgive him? But Victor knew he had done the right thing. They had to face the world on their own. They couldn't keep relying on him to fix everything. It was time for them to grow up. It was time for him to stop being the one who always made everything okay. The phone buzzed again. It was Jack's response. What do you mean, Dad? You can't just stop helping. I've always needed you. Victor stared at the message. It stung. But it was exactly what he had expected. Jack didn't understand yet. But Victor couldn't go back now. He had already made his choice. The decision had been made. He sat back in his chair and exhaled deeply. It was done. He couldn't undo it, but he had to trust that it was the right choice. It was time for both of them, his children and himself, to face reality. The days following Victor's decision felt like a strange kind of silence. For years, he had been the one to fix every problem, to patch up the holes in his family's lives. But now, with his decision to stop offering financial support, everything had changed. The phone, which used to ring constantly with requests from Dylan and Lily, was eerily quiet. At first, the silence felt peaceful. It was a reprieve from the constant demands, the never-ending need for his attention. But as the days stretched into a week, the silence began to feel uncomfortable. Victor had expected some anger, some pushback, but the radio silence left him questioning if he had made the right decision. He had spent so many years being the safety net for his family. Was this really what was best for them? And if so, what would become of him? The first call came from Dylan. His voice was tight when he spoke. Dad, I got your message. I didn't think you were serious. I don't know what I'm supposed to do now. You've always been the one who helped me out. I thought I could always count on you. Victor felt his chest tighten. It was exactly what he had expected. Dylan wasn't angry yet, but the disappointment and confusion in his voice were clear. Dylan, I've always been here for you, but I've been helping you for too long. You need to figure this out on your own. I can't be the one who fixes everything anymore. But you don't understand, Dad, Dylan insisted, his voice rising. I'm trying. I'm doing everything I can, but it's hard. Everything feels like it's falling apart. And now I can't even turn to you for help. What am I supposed to do? Victor took a deep breath, steadying his voice. You're an adult, Dylan. You have to face the consequences of your choices. You've been relying on me for so long, and it's time for you to do this on your own. You'll figure it out, I know you will. There was a long pause on the other end. Victor could almost hear Dylan processing his words, unsure of how to respond. I don't know if I can do this, Dylan said quietly. I thought I could, but now it feels like too much. Victor's heart ached for his son, but he knew what had to be done. You can do this, Dylan. You just have to believe in yourself. I'm not going anywhere, but I'm not going to fix it for you anymore. It's time to grow up. Dylan didn't respond right away. After a moment, Victor heard a small sigh. Okay, Dad. I'll figure it out, but it's hard, and it's going to take time. That's all I ask, Victor said softly. Take your time. But know that you can do this. You've always had it in you. The call ended with a strained sense of finality. Dylan hadn't exactly embraced the change, but at least he wasn't outright rejecting it. For Victor, it was a small victory. But the doubts lingered. He had done what he believed was best, but the fallout was harder than he had expected. The next day, Victor sat in his favorite armchair, trying to settle his mind. He had promised himself that he would start living for himself, that he would find joy in the things he had neglected for years. But as the hours ticked by, the silence felt like an uncomfortable reminder of the family he had once nurtured. The phone buzzed again, breaking the stillness. It was Lily. "Dad," she said, her voice quieter than usual. "I don't know what to say. I got your message and I guess I understand. But I didn't think it would come to this." Victor braced himself for the same reaction he had gotten from Dylan. "Lily, I know this isn't easy. It's not easy for me either. But you have to learn how to take responsibility for your own life. You've been relying on me for too long." "I know," Lily said, her voice thick with emotion. I've been so scared of failing. I've always turned to you for help. And now I'm scared. I don't know if I can make it without you." Victor closed his eyes, feeling the weight of her words. He had always been there for her, always ready to provide whatever she needed. But this time, he couldn't. This time, she had to face it on her own. "Lily, you are capable. You've been capable all along. You've got to believe in yourself. It's time for you to stop relying on me to fix everything for you. You've got the strength to do this." "I don't know if I can," Lily whispered. "What if I fail?" Victor felt the familiar ache in his chest, the desire to reassure her, to tell her that everything would be okay. But he had to let her fail. He had to let her learn. If you fail, then you get back up. You learn from it and try again. That's how life works, Lily. We all have to face setbacks. But we can't keep running to others to save us." Lily was silent for a moment, and Victor knew she was processing his words. Then, finally, she spoke. "I'll try, Dad. I'll try to do this on my own." Victor's heart swelled with a mix of pride and sadness. It wasn't going to be easy for her, or for him, but it was necessary. For both of them. "That's all I'm asking for, Lily. Just try." Over the next few days, Victor's world was filled with a strange kind of quiet. He kept waiting for the inevitable storm. The anger, the frustration, the resentment, but it never came. Instead, he found himself adjusting to the stillness, to the space he had longed for but never truly embraced. The weeks that followed felt like an adjustment period. There were small victories, moments when Dylan and Lily reached out to share their progress, however small. There were no more requests for money, no more pleas for help. Instead, they were learning to navigate their lives on their own, one small step at a time. Victor felt a strange mix of pride and guilt as he watched them grow. He knew this was what they needed. They needed to stand on their own. But at times, he couldn't help but feel the loss. The role he had always played, the one that had defined him for so long, was now gone. The days following the decision to stop supporting Dylan and Lily were a mixture of quiet reflection and quiet anxiety for Victor. He had expected their reactions to be filled with anger and frustration, but the silence was the thing that unsettled him the most. It wasn't until weeks had passed that he realized his decision had given them the space they needed to change, but the guilt of that choice still lingered in his heart. His children were, in a way, getting stronger, but Victor was struggling with the silence that now filled his life. Victor had spent years prioritizing his children's well-being over his own. Every choice he made, every sacrifice, had been made in the name of providing for them. He had given so much of himself that he had nearly forgotten who he was without that role. Now, as he sat alone in his home, there was an unfamiliar peace, one that he had once longed for but now wasn't sure how to manage. The house felt emptier than before, with his children no longer leaning on him for support. It was as though he had lost his purpose. He wasn't sure what to do with all the extra time. His mind wandered through memories of old hobbies he once enjoyed: reading, taking walks in the park, visiting the old cafe down the street. He hadn't done any of those things in years. But even as he recognized this void, the thought of stepping back into those activities felt like a foreign concept, something he could no longer grasp. It was mid-afternoon when the phone rang. Victor had been doing paperwork in his study, but he paused at the sound of the call. It wasn't from his office, nor was it a work-related issue. He picked up the phone and saw Lily's name flashing across the screen. His heart sank a little. It had been a while since they had spoken at length. Dad. Lily's voice came through, quiet but steady. I just wanted to thank you for everything. I don't know what you were thinking when you made the decision to stop helping us. But I understand now. I get it. Victor leaned back in his chair, trying to steady his breath. His chest tightened, but he forced himself to remain calm. He had been waiting for this moment, hoping that his children would eventually understand the reasoning behind his choice. I know it's been hard, but it was the right thing to do, Lily. You needed to learn how to stand on your own. It wasn't fair to you or to me to keep doing this. I know, Lily replied softly. And I'm sorry for always turning to you. I thought I was independent, but in reality, I wasn't. I was just relying on you to fix everything. I should have learned to handle my own struggles long ago. Victor paused. I'm proud of you, Lily. It's not easy, but you're learning. And that's all that matters. I don't know if I would have ever learned if you hadn't made that decision. I didn't realize how much I was depending on you until now. I'm not asking for your help anymore, Dad. I'm doing it on my own. Victor could hear the conviction in Lily's voice, a steady determination that he hadn't heard in a long time. It was hard for him to admit, but this was what he had hoped for his children, finally understanding the value of responsibility, independence, and hard work. It was bittersweet, though. He had wanted this for them, but at the same time, it meant a shift in their relationship. The familiar dynamic that had existed between them was no longer there. But as he listened to Lily, he realized that the distance wasn't a bad thing, it was necessary. It was what they both needed to grow. I'm proud of you, Lily. Truly, Victor said. You're doing great. And remember, I'm always here for you when you need me. But you're right. You don't need to rely on me anymore. Lily's voice softened. Thanks, Dad. I know it's not easy for you either. But I'll make it. Victor smiled to himself, feeling an unfamiliar sense of pride in his daughter. This moment was a milestone, a turning point not just for her, but for him as well. As the conversation ended, Victor stood up, his mind heavy with the weight of the past few weeks. He hadn't expected things to be so difficult. The silence, the distance, the uncertainty, it all felt like a weight on his shoulders. But there was something else there too. Something he hadn't noticed before. The change he had seen in Lily, and the change he was beginning to see in himself. This journey, though painful, had pushed them all toward growth. The following day, Victor received another text from Dylan. The message was brief, but it carried the same tone of quiet gratitude that he had heard from Lily. Dad, I've been working a lot more at the warehouse. I'm barely making ends meet, but I'm doing it. And I haven't asked you for anything. I know I should have done this a long time ago, but I'm proud of what I'm doing now. Thanks for making me face this. Victor sat in his study, looking at the words on the screen, his heart swelling with pride. His children were growing up. They were becoming the people he had always hoped they would be. And it wasn't because he had solved their problems, it was because they had learned to solve their own. This wasn't just a victory for them. It was a victory for him, too. He had learned that he didn't have to be the one to carry the burden. His children were strong enough to handle it themselves. As he set the phone down, he felt something shift inside him. It was the same feeling he had experienced when he made the decision to step back. Relief. Yes. But also something deeper, something more profound. He wasn't just letting go of his responsibilities as a father. He was letting go of the role he had played for so long. The role that had defined his life. And as much as it hurt, he realized now that it was necessary. They needed to grow, to make their own mistakes, to experience their own struggles. It wasn't easy, but it was the right choice. Victor stood up from his chair and walked to the window, looking out at the world beyond. His children were finding their own way, just as he was. For the first time in years, he felt like he could breathe again. The future was uncertain, but it was also filled with possibilities. Victor woke up early the next morning with a sense of peace he hadn't felt in years. It wasn't that everything had been solved or that all the problems had disappeared. It was the opposite, actually. His children were still struggling, but they were doing it on their own. For the first time, they were taking the reins of their own lives, and for the first time in a long time, Victor felt like he was finally allowing them to grow. The house, still quiet in the early hours, felt almost unfamiliar. The absence of the usual chaos left him with a heavy stillness that was both freeing and unsettling. The calls that once demanded his time and energy were gone, replaced by a silence that lingered in the corners of his life. It was strange, but Victor couldn't help but feel that this was the first step toward something better for all of them. He spent the next few days reflecting on his decision. It wasn't easy, but it was necessary. He had made a choice that, while painful, was forcing his children to stand on their own. He had seen the small changes in them, the slow shift toward responsibility. He knew they were still struggling, but there was no turning back now. They were learning the lessons they needed to learn, and they would be better for it. Victor's own journey was just beginning. He was still figuring out who he was outside of his role as the family's provider. For years, he had defined himself by what he gave to others: his time, his money, his energy. Now, for the first time in a long time, he had to ask himself what it meant to live for himself. He wasn't sure yet, but he was determined to figure it out. A week passed before Victor heard from Lily again. This time, it wasn't a desperate plea for help. It wasn't an apology for the way things had been. It was something different. A simple message that made his heart swell with pride. "Dad, I've been working on a new project for my business. It's going slow, but it's going. I'm not asking for help anymore, and I think I've finally found my way. It's been tough, but I'm doing it. Thank you for giving me the space to do this." Victor read the message several times, letting the words sink in. Lily wasn't just surviving, she was growing. She had always been the one who had seemed the most capable, the one who had seemed to have it all together. But this time, there was something different. She was taking full responsibility for her business, her success, and even her failure. Victor texted back immediately. "I'm so proud of you, Lily. You've come a long way, and I know it's not easy, but you're doing it. Keep going. I'm always here when you need me, but I believe in you." When he hit send, he felt a wave of relief wash over him. He had been so afraid of pushing them away, so afraid of losing them in the process of teaching them independence. But the truth was, they were stronger than he had ever given them credit for. That evening, Victor sat at the dinner table alone, a glass of wine in hand. For the first time in a long while, he was finally able to relax. His children were figuring it out, just as he had hoped they would. They weren't relying on him to fix everything anymore. They were learning to stand on their own. And that's when he received another text, this time from Dylan. "Dad, I just wanted to let you know that I got a better position at the warehouse. It's not a lot, but it's more hours and I'm starting to save a bit. I know it's not much, but I feel like I'm actually moving forward for the first time in a while." Victor stared at the text for a long time, feeling a mixture of pride and disbelief. He had known Dylan was capable, but this was the first real sign that he was finally taking control of his life. Dylan, the son who had once been filled with potential but lacked the direction to make it work, was finding his way. "Slowly, but surely," Victor replied, his heart swelling with pride. "That's great, Dylan. I'm proud of you. You're learning. I know it's hard, but you're doing it. Keep pushing forward." When he set the phone down, a wave of relief washed over him. It was all starting to fall into place. His children were on their way. They weren't perfect, and they still had a long road ahead, but they were getting there. And for the first time in years, Victor felt like he had done something right. The weeks that followed were filled with slow but steady progress. There were no more phone calls asking for money, no more requests for his help. His children were figuring it out on their own, and while it wasn't always easy, they were doing it. Victor, too, was adjusting. He had always thought of himself as the one who held everything together. But now, as he watched his children become independent, he realized that he was no longer just a father. He was a man who had made a difficult choice, and in doing so, had given his family the tools to survive without him. And for the first time in years, he found that he could breathe. As the weeks passed, Victor found himself reconnecting with parts of his life he had long neglected. He took up old hobbies, painting, reading, even taking walks through the park. The things he had once enjoyed now seemed to have a new kind of meaning. He was no longer just living for others. He was living for himself. One afternoon, as Victor sat in the park with a book in hand, he felt a sense of contentment he hadn't felt in years. The quiet, the stillness, was no longer something he feared. It was something he had earned. For the first time in a long time, Victor allowed himself to imagine a future where he wasn't defined by his role as a father or provider. He had given everything he had for his children, but now, he was learning to live for himself. He was learning to reclaim the pieces of his life he had given away so freely. And as he watched the world pass by, he realized that this new chapter in his life wasn't just about letting go of his children. It was about letting go of the parts of himself he had lost along the way. It had been 2 months since Victor made the decision to stop supporting his children. And as the days passed, he could feel the weight of that choice slowly lifting. The silence he had feared so much had become a comforting presence. It wasn't a cold, isolating quiet. It was the kind of peace he hadn't known in years. A peace born from the fact that he was no longer holding his family together with one hand, his own dreams and aspirations dangling precariously with the other. Victor had spent so many years putting everyone else first that he had forgotten what it meant to live for himself. His life had revolved around providing, solving problems, and being the constant pillar of support for Dylan and Lily. But now, for the first time in ages, he had the space to breathe and think about what he wanted, what he needed. He had rediscovered old hobbies, reading, painting, even taking long walks in the nearby park. There was something refreshing about the small things, the quiet moments, the things he had once enjoyed but put aside because of the overwhelming demands of his family. It was hard to describe, but there was a new kind of peace in him, one that had been long buried beneath years of responsibility. Victor's work had slowed down a little too, something that would have stressed him out in the past. But now, he welcomed the reprieve. His firm was steady, and while his workload wasn't as heavy as it had been in years past, he appreciated the breathing room. For once, he wasn't overwhelmed by endless meetings and long nights at his desk. He was finding joy in things outside of his work, things that were for him alone. But even as he settled into this new normal, there were moments of doubt. Moments when the silence grew heavy again, when he questioned whether his children were truly okay. It was in those moments, when he found himself staring out at the city below, that Victor reminded himself that he had done the right thing. He had given his children the gift of independence, the opportunity to find their own way. But it wasn't easy. One Friday afternoon, after a long week of quiet reflection, Victor received a call from Dylan. It had been several weeks since they had spoken in depth. At first, Dylan had sent a few short texts, and there had been no mention of asking for money. But this call was different. "Hey, Dad," Dylan said, his voice more confident than Victor had heard in a long time. "I just wanted to let you know I've been working a lot of overtime at the warehouse. It's tough, but I'm starting to save money. I'm paying my rent on time now. And I'm actually starting to put something aside for emergencies. It feels good. Really good. I'm paying my rent on time now." Victor couldn't suppress the smile that spread across his face. "That's great, Dylan. I'm so proud of you. I know it hasn't been easy, but you're doing it." There was a pause on the other end, as if Dylan were gathering his thoughts. "I wanted to tell you something else," Dylan said, his voice more serious now. "You were right, Dad. I've been avoiding the reality of my own life for a long time. I kept expecting things to change without doing anything about it. But now, I see that I have to be the one to make it happen. No one else can do it for me." Victor felt a pang in his chest, a mix of pride and sadness. Dylan's journey had been hard, but he was finally beginning to understand what it meant to take control of his life. "I'm proud of you, son. You're learning what it means to be independent, and that's what matters. Keep going." "I will," Dylan replied. Thanks for believing in me, even when I didn't believe in myself." The conversation ended with a promise to check in soon, and Victor sat in his office chair, staring at the phone for a moment. He felt an overwhelming sense of pride. Dylan was growing, learning to take ownership of his life. It was slow progress, but it was progress. Later that evening, after a quiet dinner and some time spent reflecting, Victor received a message from Lily. It wasn't a call, but it was more than a casual text. It was a sign of growth. "Dad, I wanted to share something with you. I've been working with a new client, and I'm actually starting to make a steady income. I'm not asking for money anymore. I'm doing it. I'm finally handling things on my own." Victor felt his chest tighten with pride as he read the message. His heart swelled as he thought about how far she had come. It hadn't been easy for her, and there had been times when she seemed unsure of herself. But she was finding her footing. He immediately typed a response. "That's amazing, Lily. I'm so proud of you. I know it's not easy, but you've got this. You're learning how to make it on your own, and that's what matters most." Within minutes, Lily replied, "Thank you, Dad. I know it hasn't been easy, but I'm doing it. I won't let you down." Victor put his phone down with a deep sigh of relief. His children were learning to stand on their own, and though it hadn't been easy for any of them, it was clear that the decision he had made was starting to pay off. Over the next few weeks, the small victories continued to pile up. Dylan secured a full-time position at the warehouse and was getting better at managing his finances. Lily's business began to see real progress as her clients increased, and she started to believe in herself more than ever before. There were still struggles, moments of self-doubt, setbacks, and challenges, but they were facing them head-on. And Victor? He was beginning to feel a sense of contentment he hadn't known in years. The quiet that had once felt suffocating was now a comfort. He was rediscovering his own life, his own passions, and he felt proud of the changes he was making for himself. One evening, after receiving another call from Lily, this time to share her excitement about landing a new client, Victor sat down in his favorite armchair. A glass of wine in hand, he stared out the window, feeling the weight of everything that had happened. His children had grown. They were finding their own way, standing on their own feet. And in the process, so had he. For the first time in years, Victor realized that he didn't need to be the one to fix everything. His children were capable of handling their own problems. They were learning to be responsible, to face the consequences of their choices, and to embrace their independence. And as for Victor, he was learning to embrace his own life, to live for himself. He didn't have all the answers. But for the first time, he felt at peace with the decision he had made. He had given them the chance to grow, and in doing so, he had given himself the opportunity to rediscover who he was outside of his role as a provider. The journey was far from over, but for the first time in a long time, Victor felt like he could finally breathe. It was a crisp autumn morning when Victor stood at the window of his home, watching the world outside with a quiet sense of contentment. The trees in the yard were beginning to shed their leaves, and the light of the early sun cast long shadows across the street. For a moment, it felt like the whole world was still, as though everything was exactly where it was meant to be. And for the first time in years, Victor felt that he too was exactly where he needed to be. In the weeks that followed his difficult decision, both Dylan and Lily had continued to make progress. They were learning to face their challenges head-on, not with the expectation that someone else would fix things for them, but with the knowledge that they were fully capable of handling their own lives. Victor had been waiting for the moment when they would reach this point, but now that it was here, it was bittersweet. His children, who had once relied on him for everything, were finally standing on their own. And while it brought him a sense of pride, there was also a quiet ache in his chest. It was hard to let go, to accept that his role as the constant caretaker had come to an end. But as the days passed, Victor found that the ache was slowly replaced by something else, a deep sense of peace. He had spent so many years defining himself by his family's needs, by his role as the provider, the fixer. Now, he was beginning to redefine himself. He wasn't just a father anymore, he was Victor, a man who could finally take care of himself. The change wasn't easy. There were still moments when the weight of his decision felt heavy. When the silence in the house seemed unbearable, there were still times when he missed the sound of his children's voices, the chaos of their lives. But in those moments, Victor had to remind himself of the bigger picture. His children were growing, and so was he. They were learning the lessons of independence, and he was learning to live without the constant need to fix everything. It was on a Sunday afternoon, weeks after his last serious conversation with his children, when Victor found himself at the park again. The same park where, months ago, he had taken the first steps toward letting go. He had promised himself that he would take time for himself, that he would begin rediscovering the things he loved. He had spent so many years focused on his children's lives, and now, he was finally giving himself permission to explore his own. Sitting on a bench near the lake, Victor watched as families walked by, children laughing, couples holding hands. For a moment, he allowed himself to simply exist in the world around him. No agenda, no expectations. It was a rare moment of stillness, a moment he had almost forgotten how to appreciate. His phone buzzed in his pocket, pulling him from his thoughts. He pulled it out, expecting a message from his office or perhaps a reminder about a task he had to complete. But when he saw Lily's name on the screen, he felt a flutter of anticipation. It had been a while since she'd called or texted, and he couldn't help but wonder what this was about. Victor answered the phone quickly, his heart beating faster as the conversation began. "Dad?" Lily's voice came through, steady and calm. "I just wanted to tell you something. I'm really proud of myself." Victor smiled, hearing the pride in her voice. "What's going on, Lily?" "I'm getting a promotion," she said, her voice growing stronger. "The company has been really impressed with my work. I've been handling my own clients, making my own decisions. I've been doing it, Dad. I'm finally doing it." Victor felt a rush of emotion. This was the moment he had been waiting for. The moment he had hoped for when he made the decision to stop helping them. Lily had faced so many challenges, doubts about her abilities, fears about her future, but now, she was finally stepping into her own, and he couldn't have been prouder. "That's amazing, Lily," he said, his voice thick with pride. "I always knew you could do it. You've always had the strength inside you, and now you're seeing what you're capable of." "Thanks, Dad," Lily replied, her voice filled with gratitude. "I just wanted to thank you for pushing me, for giving me the space to grow. I never realized how much I needed to do this on my own." Victor sat back on the bench, his heart swelling with pride. His daughter was becoming the woman he always knew she could be. It wasn't easy, and it hadn't been immediate, but she had learned to take responsibility, to face her fears, and to move forward on her own. And that, he realized, was the greatest gift he could give her. "I'm so proud of you, Lily. You've done the hard work, and now you're seeing the results. Keep going." Later that evening, as the sun set and the sky turned a soft shade of pink, Victor received another text message, this time from Dylan. He had been hesitant to check his phone, unsure of what to expect, but when he read the message, a wave of warmth flooded through him. "Dad, I just wanted to thank you again for everything. I know I wasn't ready before, but now I'm starting to get it. I've been working hard, saving, and I'm starting to feel like I'm in control of my life. I'm not there yet, but I'm getting there." Victor read the message a few times, feeling a sense of deep satisfaction. Dylan had always been full of potential, but he had struggled to take responsibility, and now he was finally taking those first steps. Victor replied immediately, his heart full of pride. "I'm proud of you, Dylan. You're doing great. It's not about being perfect, it's about making progress. And you're doing that. Keep it up." As the days went by, Victor saw more and more signs that his children were continuing to grow. Dylan was taking responsibility for his finances, learning how to budget and plan for the future. Lily was succeeding at work, gaining confidence in her abilities, and starting to see the fruits of her hard work. Victor, too, was growing. He wasn't defined by his role as a provider anymore. He had learned that he could be a father without always having to fix things. He had learned to live for himself, to take joy in the small things, and to embrace the quiet moments that had once seemed so foreign. And as he stood on the balcony of his apartment, watching the city come to life below, Victor knew that this was just the beginning. The future was uncertain, but it was full of possibility. His children were finding their way, and so was he. For the first time in years, he felt like he could breathe, like he was finally living his own life, not just the life he had built for others,